And welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, and I am here to give you the SEC transfer portal winners and losers. We have already done 3 conferences in the Power 5. We've done the ACC, we've done the Big East, and we have done the Big 10. So this is part 4 of the series. Be sure to subscribe to our content here at CBB Review to learn more, and be sure to like this video as well if you like this content. So let's get into it. We're going to start with the losers, then we're going to get into the winners. So our first loser for the SEC transfer portal class is going to be Oklahoma. It's really just not looking great for Porter Moser and the boys. They have lost, in my opinion, what is 3 of their 4 most important players from last season in Javion McCollum, in Otega Away, and in Milos Uzan. They're all out, and all they really got was Kobe Elvis from Dayton, albeit he was a solid player in the Atlantic 10 for a good team, but that is just underwhelming to me overall, and I feel like Oklahoma could fall victim to the same problem that they had in the Big 12, in that they lose all these games to good teams, but end up having a poor conference record because they are a step below the rest. My second loser, that is going to be the other newest member of the Southeastern Conference. That's the Texas Longhorns, also coming in from the Big 12. This is not a massive loser, even in the same way that I think Oklahoma is, but you look at Texas from last year to this coming year. Max Asmus, he's finally graduated, unfortunately. You got Dylan Dessou as well. He's gone. And then there were 2 guys that were supposed to step up and be the big dogs next year. That is Dylan Mitchell and Tyrese Hunter, but they are gone to the transfer portal. Now, I know this is not a major loss because Texas did get a few notable guys, including Draymond Mark. He was the leading scorer for Arkansas last year. They also got Jordan Pope, who was the leading scorer for Oregon State. So 2 guys who put up big numbers at underperforming power conference schools. And then you get a couple of key contributors from Indiana State. Of course, not their big one, Robbie Avila. He is no longer playing college hoops. I know that's not a major loss, but I feel like when you have a chance to take things to the next level, Texas was good last year. They could have been great, but I think at the very best this offseason, they broke even, and I don't think that is the most ideal scenario for the Longhorns. Now, my other loser is going to be a program who I don't think lost a ton, but it's just hard to see them really being a team I could get excited about next year, and that is Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs, not because they had detrimental losses. Like I said, I mean, I know they do lose Jabri Abdur-Rahim. He was their leading scorer. Noah Thomason is graduated as well. But I think it's more because they didn't bring in a ton, and it's hard to get excited just overall about the trajectory of this Georgia Bulldogs program. Their best adds are Tyron Lawrence from Vanderbilt and Dakota LaFew from Murray State. Just not guys that are moving the needle, and I feel like Georgia will be a bottom feeder in the SEC this coming year. So those are our SEC transfer portal losers. Now let's get to the fun part. Let's talk about the winners. I had 3 as well, but I just wanted to give a few honorable mentions that I was thinking about in the winners category. Now, of course, I feel like the SEC did better in overall than most conferences in college basketball in this transfer portal cycle. I mean, that makes sense. They are among the best conferences in the game. So you would think they would have more winners than losers, and that is the case. But a few honorable mentions that couldn't make the top 3. We'll start with Kentucky. Now, Mark Pope shows he can recruit with a really good class that he brings in, but I still think that Kentucky roster is not what we are accustomed to seeing in the past, just from not having John Calipari and his stature in there anymore. Missouri is another honorable mention in the winners category. Just, I'm not super confident in them heading into the next season. That's why they did not make the winners, but they did get a few notable adds. They add Tony Perkins from Iowa. They add Mark Mitchell from Duke. So just a little shout out to Missouri. Again, I'm not sure they are a tournament team, but it's good to see them get a little bit of a net positive in this transfer portal cycle. But we did have a few teams that did make this category of SEC transfer portal winners. Let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide, who bring in just an absolute loaded class, starting with Aiden Holloway, a 5-star sophomore. He was a 5-star freshman. Now he had a pretty solid season. He is ready to break out. But you know where Aiden Holloway comes from? Their arch rival, the Auburn Tigers. Holloway played in a rotation full of upperclassmen last season. Now he's ready to take that next step at Alabama. So that is a huge addition for them. They also add Chris Youngblood, who is the best player for a South Florida team that won 25 games last year, had a really big turnaround in the American Conference, and Chris Youngblood was a major reason for that. So he's now an Alabama Crimson Tide. They get Cliff Amori from Rutgers. This is a guy I talks about in the Big Ten episode being the reason that it was a big losing class, or maybe a minor losing class for Rutgers, but just not having Amori there and instead him being at Alabama, that is a major rim protector, major defensive threat with some finishing around the rim ability that Alabama adds. They also add Houston Millette from Pepperdine, who's a guy who could score. They do have a few guys coming out that are notable. Nick Pringle is probably the main one, but I think if you compare Nick Pringle to Cliff Amori, Nate Oates got an upgrade there, in my opinion. And Ryland Griffin to Kansas is not ideal, but I think they could survive and really thrive because of this transfer portal class. Because we look at Alabama, we looked at the trajectory of their program. It is as good as it could possibly be. They were phenomenal in 2023. Didn't make it through the tournament as much as they wanted to. And then last year, their defense struggled a little bit. And I believe they were only a 4 seed or so in the NCAA tournament. But then they go on to make a Final Four run. So everyone's back to being excited about the Alabama program. And this transfer class, plus they get back Mark Sears and Grant Nelson. I mean, they're going to be legit scary headed into next season. This could be another 1 seed in next year's NCAA tournament. Another transfer portal winner from the SEC. We're going to talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks, who I think, obviously, the major storyline in their offseason is John Calipari taking that head coaching job. And pretty much as soon as that happened, we knew he was going to bring in talent. That wasn't really a question. But overall, I think they upgraded in the talent department to an extent that their fans are going to get extremely excited about. And we start with DJ Wagner, who is one of the few Kentucky guys that Arkansas brings in. He proved he could be a star at the SEC level if given the opportunity. Of course, you know, that Kentucky rotation was pretty stacked, so he wasn't featured there, but I think he'll be a star in the SEC now with a better opportunity to just rack up that usage rate. And then they had young bigs Adu Tiero and Zvonimir Ivasic, also from Kentucky. Those guys are going to head to Arkansas next year to play. And also, John L. Davis from Florida Atlantic. He was big for their Final Four run. Then he had a phenomenal last season for Florida Atlantic where he put up 16 points, 6 rebounds for a team. Again, they were good. And then Jonas Adu, Tennessee guy who was the unsung hero for that team last year that made the Elite Eight. So that is just a huge class that Arkansas brings in. Now they do lose their 2 guys that basically amounted for like 98% of their scoring last year in Sherman Mark and Khalif Battle. We talked about Sherman Mark just a second ago, but still, I think you're going to make that trade. It's going to be a great Arkansas team in terms of talent, and the expectations are not the same that they are in Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky. So it's going to be just a win-win situation, really, for John Calipari here. Ole Miss, the final SEC transfer portal winner I'm going to talk about today. This team, I felt their main issue last year was they were out physicaled a lot. And what do? They go into the portal and address it. Chris Beard, that is. They added two mid-major guys to their front court. And these are guys that racked up those points, racked up those rebounds, guys that could really just go get themselves a bucket. And that is Mikael Brown-Jones from UNC Greensboro and Malik Dia from Belmont. Now, I know not all guys who put up big numbers at the mid-major level are created equally, right? Because you could do that for just a bad team in a bad conference. But these are guys coming from mid-major teams that were good last year. Both of them won 20 games, UNCG and Belmont, that is. They play in solid conferences. And this also doesn't mention the backcourt guys that Ole Miss brought in. They brought in Sean Padula from Virginia Tech. They brought in Dre Davis from Seton Hall. Now, these are different mold guys. These are guys coming from mediocre to below average power conference teams last year, but they were the main options. Dre Davis and Padula, that is. And the returning cast is back for super senior seasons. They got Matthew Morrell and Jamin Brakefield back. So honestly, if they could be physical enough, they could defend well enough, this is really a vastly improved Ole Miss team because the offense is going to be extremely dangerous. And I really can't wait to watch them. So that will do it for today's edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. Once again, be sure to subscribe and like this video if you like what we heard. We will have the Big 12 transfer portal winners and losers coming out later this week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and take care.